Welcome to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast, presented by FantasyGolfBag.com, your number one source for the most in-depth PGA Tour analysis in the daily fantasy and sports betting world. Each week, our experts will discuss everything you need to know, from the course preview and key stats to top plays, fades, and strategies. Whether golf betting, grinding out cash games, or playing for a big GPP win, our team has you covered. Let's get after it.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek. I am joined this evening by Mr. JkrayASU, also known as Jacob. Axis is out of the country or out of town, and Skylar is certainly out of the country, down in Mexico. So excited to have Jacob on board this week and talk some Memorial. Probably not necessarily one of my favorite events just because it's not local to me, but definitely one of the best fields, one of the best golf courses that they play every year. So always fun to watch. So in that regard, certainly one of my favorite events of the year. So let me go ahead and bring in Jacob and see how's everything's going, man.
It's going good, Drew. I'm excited for this event. I know we're in a really good span of golf tournaments right now. Colonial last week, and then Memorial this week, and then the U.S. Open is just right around the corner. So really excited about this event. And like you said, the field is really, really strong. Probably one of the better ones outside of majors and WGC events that we'll see. And pricing it's not, major soft, but it certainly has some areas where you can work around it and make a really solid lineup. So excited to dig in and see what we can figure out.
Yeah, it's not crazy soft. It's definitely some higher priced guys, and we'll go through the whole pricing like we normally do in every show. But I think there's some guys that are actually unusually priced up, and a lot of values. I think that you can build some pretty strong lineups. I think we'll go through the golf course here in just a minute, but yeah, this is going to be one of the strongest fields of the year outside of the majors, like you said, in the Players Championship. It's an invitational, so think of this similar to the Arnold Palmer Invitational. I think the field is 120, and it's always the 120, 100 out of the 150, 175 best players in the world. So you get a little bit of an international taste. You'll see some guys that have some Euro stats, so you can find all of those at fantasygolfbag.com. We'll have those mixed in with our PGA Tour rolling stats. Gives you a good reference point for guys that are coming from overseas, and you can kind of compare apples to apples there.
Yeah.
But yeah, super strong field. Interesting last week with Kevin Na. He's playing this week. And actually had some decent finishes here in the past. So we'll kind of get through all of that, and we'll go through a couple of housekeeping notes, and then we'll get rolling on the golf course and the players that we like. So first off, real quick, the Listener League is posted. You should be able to find the link in the description of this show, whether you're watching on YouTube or on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or Android, whatever they call it. Always appreciate you, liking it, giving it a review, rating, whatever you can offer on that platform. We appreciate that. And then you can find the Listener League link just below in the description, so you can hop in there and compete against all of us and all the people at fantasygolfbag.com. I'm kind of looking through some of the contests for this week. That was one thing I wanted to add going forward a little bit. I know we talked about some people on our website looking forward to getting more information on contest selection. So kind of looking through this week, you got a couple of the big GPPs, so I'll just touch on this for like 1 minute. The $5 is juiced up a bit. I know you already pointed that out in our Slack chat. $150K to first, and then it really drops off pretty substantially. I think like top 200 is like 5x or 6x, something like that. It's pretty awful out of 140,000 entrants. So you're basically first or last. Is essentially what you're going for there. I think second place is actually, I'll pull it up, $70K. So anything inside the top 5, top 7, we'll say, is probably all right. Going down the list a little bit further, we definitely have some good 3-max. So what we like to recommend in our Fantasy Golf Bag chat is the 3-maxes are always ones to target. They have ones ranging from $3 up to $150. They got a $20 in there. So again, you get 3 entries. Everyone else you're competing against competing against gets 3 entries. So it kind of levels the playing field a bit where you don't have to worry about, someone running 150 lineups in the $5 and you're still competing against 140,000 entrants. In the 3 max, you're usually around 1,000, maybe a little less. So it definitely gives you better chances of actually winning the GPP, which are still like $5,000 to first, which are pretty good paydays, and really bumps your bankroll up where you're not having to beat 100,000 people. So pretty crazy. So definitely check into the 3 maxes. There's a couple good ones there. And then the single entries, there's an Albatross, which is a $12, a $33 Dogleg, which is a really good structure. They actually have a $6, which is a little bit cheaper. And again, it's a single entry, throwing 1 entry against everyone else's single entry. So gives you a little bit better of a chance that you don't have to beat some crazy, 5 or we'll say 3 6K guys with a bunch of 9K studs that someone put in their 50th lineup in the $5, something crazy. So, Jacob, I just kind of wanted to bring that up just a bit because I know people are looking forward to that opportunity to fine-tune their contest selection more or less. So,
yeah. The only other thing I would add to that is that I think there are some 5 maxes, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't see any 5 maxes.
Okay, occasionally they'll have a 5 max, like the 12K 8-iron is a 5 max. It's an $8 entry, and the 20 max is really kind of. I know you had spoken to it just briefly there earlier, but that's where you're kind of getting really losing the opportunity to capitalize on a lineup that isn't dead on something that would win a bigger GPP like you said. But a complete agreement with you. 3 maxes and single entries is kind of where I stay for the most part. I obviously will throw one in the the $5 just to.
Yeah, always throw to the $5. You never know if you're going to hit the nuts. You might as well cash 100K. This week 150K. But yeah, especially if you're only building, let's just say you build 3 lineups. You're doing the Pat Mayo Open. I didn't bring up that, but that's also a 3 max, a pretty good structure there. So let's just say you're building 3 lineups, and you allocated $20 to each lineup or $25 to each lineup, something like that. Just add $5 to every entry. You throw it in the $5. At least you have something to sweat if like your lineup is really just going nuts on the weekend. You would hate to have your lineup, smoke the 3 maxes by 50 points and it would have won the 100K, but you didn't enter it in there. So, highly recommend if you're building a few lineups, just go ahead and add the $5. You don't have to do the $44 club twirl. Just do the $5. Just give yourself, a little bit more excitement than just winning, $1,000, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, the Fantasy Golf World Championships are loaded up. So I think this was about the time of year. I know you got a ticket at the Players last year, so that was real early in the season. But I know this was about the time of year for me where I really started kicking into getting into the qualifiers, some of the satellites, stuff like that. So you can check the lobby for satellites and qualifiers. There's $5 qualifiers, $33 qualifiers, up to $9.90 double qualifier. Triple qualifier, actually. So a lot of different ones. Most people probably stick with the $33 or the $5, but another thing to keep considering as you go forward. It's a huge event that comes in September, I believe. Only 200 entrants, 250K to first, so obviously your chances are greatly increased there. Just got to qualify. That's the tough part. So that's the last bit I want to touch on for contest selection. I know people wanted to do that, so we'll start adding more of that onto the website. That way you don't have to hear me spiel about it on the podcast. But if you did like this segment, you kind of like hearing thoughts about contest selection or maybe like what contests are good for that particular week, certainly leave us a review and mention that, or you can DM me or tweet at me on Twitter at Redkacheek, and we'll try to add this segment in there so people aren't terribly lost when they're trying to figure out, what are good structures and what aren't good structures without clicking through every single contest. So that'll pretty much do it, man. Let's go ahead and dive into the course, and we'll talk through our players and key stats, and we'll get these people moving this week for a shorter week, it feels like, with Memorial Day today, us recording on Monday. So happy Memorial Day to everybody. Forgot about that. So let's go ahead and dive into it, man.
All right.
So the Memorial Tournament is held at Murifield Village up in Ohio. It's up in Dublin, Ohio. It's a Jack Nicklaus design. It's a Jack Nicklaus golf course, Jack Nicklaus Golf Club. Like, this is his place. He grew up in Columbus, Ohio, I believe. This is his special place. And the guys that show up here, obviously it's an invitational. Jack Nicklaus is, you can't really argue from a major standpoint. He's the greatest player that ever lived. So guys are lining up to play in this event. It's a par 72, 7,392 yards. So about average, maybe a little bit longer, but nothing crazy. Playing on bent grass greens and running through the golf course. So the last 4 years, the winning score has pretty much been 15 under. 2018, it was 15 under. 2017, 13 under. 2016, 15 under. And then 2015, 15 under. So 15 under is probably your target score to win this week. And then what's funny is, the course doesn't really allow yourself to run away with it. There's not crazy low scores. The stroke average last year was 71.4, so about a half a stroke under par. The last 4 out of 5 years, there was a playoff. So there's a lot of excitement on Sunday. So certainly if you're watching on Sunday, there's a good chance there'll be 2, 3, 4 guys tied for the lead or within a shot of the lead coming down the stretch. So I'll kind of leave it there, and then I'll bring up some of the key stats that I looked at on the golf course. So Jacob, if you have any thoughts on the golf course in general, and then I'll dive into the stats.
I will say the only thing that I read through, just kind of getting ready to chat this evening, was, like you said, it's about tour average length, and for the most part, these guys, some of the longer guys, are going to be a bit more strategizing off the tee. Some of the longer guys might be hitting 3 woods to avoid some really well done placement of fairway bunkers that Jack did when he made the design. And
rough. The rough is brutal. It says it's only 3 inches this year, but every single year, guys, scrambling is a big deal around here. But just if you're hitting it in the rough, it's going to be really tough to keep it on these greens. They're going to be rolling at 13 feet on the stimp meter, which is like Augusta speed. I mean, this course is going to play extremely firm and fast from around the green and into the green if you're hitting it into the rough.
Yeah, and also, that being said, certainly second shots come into play as being much more of importance. Certainly approach is always something worth considering, but I think in this event in particular, it's shown to correlate really, really strongly with performance. Anybody that's hitting the ball well with their irons is going to be putting themselves in position to capitalize on that. But I think that we've seen specifically here this Nicklaus design, that it's even more so.
Yeah.
So, those are just a couple things on top. I know you're going to jump into some sort of key stats, and I've got a couple questions, and we can just work our way through it.
Okay. Yeah, so you kind of talked about the golf course off the tee. Guys it's not so much strategizing, but there's courses where prioritizing the fairway is much more important than bombing it down there, just because there's a lot of dog legs in this golf course. You're trying to get it in play off the tee so you can have an iron so you can hit it on the green and stop it with some spin. Mm-hmm. So last year, this was the 15th shortest driving course on tour at 284 yards as an average driving distance. Driving accuracy was 71%, so one of the highest. So obviously they're prioritizing, if you think from a player's mindset, they're prioritizing fairways here. So really off the tee stats aren't really something I'm looking at this week. I always use off the tee in general, strokes gained off the tee, but I bumped it down quite a bit. It's going to be weighed into what I look at, but it's not going to be as high as it is like I did at the Wells Fargo or the PGA Championship, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Going down the list as far as green and regulation, I'm certainly looking at strokes gained approach. I'm looking at green and regulation of recent results. Birdie or better. So this golf course ranked I hear fireworks in the background. Wasn't sure what that was. 42nd on tour for birdie average. So a lot of birdies can be made. It's just kind of avoiding the bogeys. So looking at birdies are better. Looking at strokes gained total. So we're getting a good mix of studs coming through, like the PGA Championship. Some played last week, some skipped it. So I'm trying to get an idea of who's actually playing well compared to the field versus just guys doing one category well. So that kind of gives me a little bit of a buffer to see, if some guy shot 3 under par at the PGA Championship, like that's a really good score. We'll say even par or 1 over at the PGA Championship. Like that's a really good score compared to the field. You get a field like last week and you got to shoot, basically 4 or 5 under a day. It's going to weigh things if you're looking at just birdies. So I like using strokes gained total. And that's pretty much it. Green and regulation, I think I mentioned, and strokes gained approach are really the biggest keys that I'm looking at this week.
Are you putting any weighting on any of the 3, bogey avoidance, around the green, or scrambling?
No, I'm not. Like I might peek at scrambling, but again, it's so variable. I'm not looking at around the green. I don't think there's a lot of around the green shots, just because there's a lot of holes that are lined with water. So it doesn't seem like holes that you can lay up to 30 yards and you're having a pitch shot.
Yeah.
So you're basically laying back to 100 yards for your third shot in a par 5, or if you had to lay up out of the rough on a par 4, or you're around the green, which would be your scrambling. I just don't like using it just because it has that element of putting, which makes it very, very hard to read.
Okay. And also, I noticed, reading up a little bit on it earlier today, some things that I read were talking about driving accuracy. And I know you noted it just a few minutes ago that the driving accuracy last year for this course was 70%, roughly 71%. Yep. Is that something that you're considering? I know the actual PGA stat for driving accuracy does not take into account, there's not a stat that takes into account clubbing down.
Right.
So,
yeah, you can, like, if anything, like I said, I use off the tee. It's bumped down this week, but from a driving accuracy standpoint, I'm not, because guys aren't hitting drivers all the time. Like the fairways are actually pretty easy to hit, and they're hitting less than driver to allow it to be even easier. So, yeah, I'm not using driving accuracy. Obviously, and you have to keep in mind too, like whether you're reading something or hearing something, how someone approaches a golf tournament. Like if I'm playing in this event, hitting the fairway is extremely important, but how I approached last week's probably not a good example, but we'll say, they played the Byron Nelson a month ago or 3 weeks ago. That's completely different. Like I could have been hitting it all over the place. That's the strategy on that golf course. So using those stats for this course doesn't help you much because you're going to be playing differently. So I do like to look at the strokes gained stats help because you're always relative to the hole and you get penalized a little bit if you're in the rough, stuff like that. So I think that includes a little bit of accuracy. But yeah, overall, I think guys will be doing their part to club down if they have to get it in the fairway.
Okay. The last thing I'll note, I'm in agreement with pretty much all of those key stats, approach and off the tee a little bit, but certainly green and regulation, birdie or better. As far as the green complexes go, I believe that they're smaller than PGA Tour average, and I know that a lot of the greens have quadrants to them, so being in the right position on the green, especially with how fast they're going to roll, is very important, which, even further emphasizes approach.
Yeah.
So just, one more thing to keep in mind there.
Yeah. Again, a lot of this stuff we talk about every week because they're fundamental stats in that regard. There's really not a lot of niche stats that I like to use because they can be a little bit noisy. I'm sure some people will maybe talk about par 4 scoring or something like that. But honestly, par 4 scoring is taking up 80 or 65 or 70% of the holes anyway. So like whatever you're looking at, you're just looking at their overall results almost. So just trying to fine tune it, looking at green and regulation accompanied with strokes gained approach gives you a pretty good indicator of guys that should have a good chance to play well here. And then if you have little ones you want to add in, like you mentioned scrambling, just as like a feeler stat, you want to see, hey, this guy's green and regulation number, we'll use Jason Day as an example, isn't the best, but his scrambling number is elite for the PGA Tour. Maybe include him in your pool for that reason. But for the most part, guys, you're going to want ball strikers here, just like every week. So,
yeah, one more thing that I will be looking at, just like you said, one of those sort of ancillary stats, not the primary ones, but par 5 scoring. All 4 of these par 5s should be pretty gettable. And I know a lot of the par 4s, there's a stretch of them on the back, I believe, that all are between 450 and 500 and might play. I think they played over par on average last year, maybe a half shot over par, but certainly the par 5s are where your greatest opportunities are. And so I will be weighing in just a little bit of par 5 scoring, not a ton, but it is nice to sort of keep an eye on those guys who can really capitalize on those holes.
Okay. All right, man. You ready to dive into some DraftKings pricing? We'll start at the top tier, work ourselves down. I really like, not a ton, but there's definitely some guys down the 6K range that I feel a lot better about this week. I mean, like, first off, apologies for Nick Watney last week. I mean, good playing on him. Not sure I can get back to him this week. He's 6,700. We'll probably get there. But yeah. I know you mentioned him on the live stream, and he played extremely well. I think he led the field in tee to green.
Yeah.
But he kind of has a course history like we'll see this week. He's basically finished in the 50s or 60s every single year he's played here. No pops. And last week he popped. So good for him. But We'll see a guy like Sungjae Im down there, 6,700, where, I mean, literally maybe a month ago he was near 8,700. He's $2,000 cheaper. So very strong field, a lot of cheap guys. So don't get overwhelmed if you're seeing guys down there that you normally see in the high 7s or low 8s, and you're like, man, this has got to be guys you have to play.
Yeah.
Every week is a different contest. Every week's a different puzzle. So definitely keep that in consideration when you're building out your lineups. Don't get trapped into thinking these guys are great plays just because they're so much cheaper than they normally are.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. We'll start at the top range here, 11K and 10K range. And we got Rory McIlroy leading off at 11.5, followed by Tiger Woods at 11.2, Justin Rose at 10.8, Ricky Fowler at 10.6, and Patrick Cantley, $10.2 thousand.
Yeah.
He really stood out to me when I first looked at the pricing. I was expecting to be maybe 9K, and I figured he would be a really easy one to play this week. But yeah, 10.2K, man. I have a rough time. Getting to him. So really, the guy that stood out to me the most, so Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods obviously missed the cut at the PGA Championship. You start looking through his results at this golf course. I mean, I think he's won it 5 times. He obviously loves this golf course. We saw as I led into the stats, this is one of the easiest fairways to hit on tour, or one of the easiest courses that you could hit the fairway on tour. And last year, he lost 7.5 strokes putting. So looking through his stats, man, he grades out really well with approach. Like we looked at his stats from the PGA Championship. Things looked really good besides off the tee. This course should be a little bit more forgiving. He has a narrative of playing really well here. 11.2 to me, I feel like hopefully goes under the radar a bit off of his miscut of the PGA. I like Tiger Woods quite a bit. Rory, I'm probably going to play in GPPs, to be honest. I don't know if there's a ton to talk about. He grades really well out in my stat model, but when we look at the his last couple events and how he played at this golf course, I feel like he's probably one of the sneakier ones when it's all said and done. I don't know if people will go up there for the salary, to be honest. And then Justin Rose down there and Ricky Fowler both missed the cut last week. I think Justin Rose is the most interesting to me. We saw this happen to him last, I was thinking last quarter, but thinking from a financial standpoint, that's not good. I think it was the end of January when he won the Torrey Pines event. I think at the Desert Classic, he lost strokes on approach, which is like the first time he did that in like a year. And I think he finished 38th. So last week, lost strokes on approach, and he won the next week at Torrey Pines. I think this week is a good bounce back spot for him. Obviously has a 2nd place and a 6th place last year. So I like Justin Rose there in GPPs. I think if the ownership swings one way or another on Rory and Justin Rose, that'll be kind of my deciding factor in GPPs. But I think Tiger's a pretty good play if his ownership stays as low as I see it.
Yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything you said. This is one of those rare weeks where I don't immediately jump to the 9Ks. I'm more inclined to save some salary and go balanced. And I actually, outside of Cantlay, who I originally liked, but did a double take when I saw his price, really don't mind any of these guys up here. I think that Fowler is interesting. He certainly has played this course well in the past, got a pretty good course history here. And coming off the miscut, I believe Rose made the cut last week.
He did. But he lost strokes on approach.
Yeah.
Which was the first time he did it since the Desert Classic, if I'm not mistaken.
And I would say, coming off of Fowler's miscut, he might go under the radar a little bit more than Rose per se. And to be honest, I don't think Tiger is going to go under the radar. Like we said in the beginning, there's, I think, enough value in the 6Ks and low 7s that you can get up to Tiger and Rory without really feeling like you're stretching it. So I don't mind any of these plays. I really like what you said, closing out your segment on it about just seeing where ownership is. I would be happy playing pretty much all these guys, which is rare for me in the top tier. But if I had to choose a favorite, it would probably be Rose for me.
Yeah.
And then, can't believe I'm going to say this, but Tiger is probably like 1A, 1B for me. I might do a Tiger main lineup. I don't know.
Yeah. I can certainly get behind the Tiger main lineup. I think, again, it depends a little bit on ownership for me, just because these guys grade out, like Rory and Tiger grade out really close to me, or close for me. The Justin Rose one just looks like he's played well here. His finish last week, I assume maybe people are like hesitant to go back. They'd rather maybe jump up to a Rory, or they jump down to a Ricky, something like that. So we'll see kind of where it shakes out. Cantlay's got to be the lowest owned up here. I really expected him to be, around, like, he should be below a Xander price. So I assumed he would be a 9K guy, and he's not. So I assume he'll be the lowest owned of this bunch.
Yeah, for sure.
Crazy. So I did want to kind of point to, because you mentioned as far as like values where Rory could get enough ownership just because there's enough decent plays cheaper this week, with it being a limited field, better values, guys, or perceived values. So the last couple winners at this event have been mainly long shots and mid shots. So last year it's Bryson, he was 60-1. Duffner was 66-1 when he won it. McGirt was 200-1. David Lingmerth 400-1, and then Matsuyama was 66-1. So the guys up here aren't necessarily must plays by any means, because the field is so stacked, but there are certainly enough values where you could get the winner in the 7K range paired up with one of these guys that finished in the top 5, and that's your winning lineup. So I do like the idea of paying up this week.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
All right, man. Well, leave me off in the 9K range. I'm fairly limited here. I'm really trying to concentrate my player pool. There's only a few in this range that really stand out to me, even though we only have like 6 to choose from. But who's kind of popping for you? You're 2 guys here.
So my primary guy, and I think he will be everyone's primary guy in the 9K range, certainly is Matt Kuchar at 9,400. Honestly, this is a Matt Kuchar that we're not used to seeing. Everyone is accustomed to the, consistent cut maker. He'll, have a T10 here or there, get a couple, maybe a win every 2 years or so. But the Matt Kuchar that we're seeing right now is, a resurgence unlike we've seen from older guys in quite some time. I mean, his course history here is very, very good. His form coming in is, it's ridiculous. It's one, two, three, four top tens out of 5, with a 12th at the Masters being the 5th one. Finished 13th here last year and back-to-back T4s the 2 years before that. I mean, that's just unheard of. He's got to win here. He will be the chalk, if not the highest owned. Hands down. So it's hard to move away from him. I think if you're going for like a strategic fade, and you're playing a lot of lineups, then that's okay. But I think Kuchar is one of these things where it's just don't get cute.
That's certainly what it seems like. Because I feel like, he's the one that stands out to me, obviously, with the course history. So I know you mentioned his recent form, but he finished 4th in 2016, 4th in 2017, and 13th here last year. Obviously, he's priced up a bit, 9,400. You kind of need that top 15, top 10 almost. Yeah. But just because he doesn't make a ton of birdies, he essentially limits his bogeys, and he makes his 10, 12, 15 birdies, and wherever he ends up is where he ends up relative to the winner. So he's not going to score crazy like you would see a normal Finau do a ton of scoring, but it definitely seems like he's been the most consistent. He's already won multiple times this year. Kuchar at 9,400 should be the highest owned. I expect him to be 28%.
Yeah, for sure. So then just a couple other guys in this range. I don't really have any interest in X-Man there at the bottom, 9K even. I know that what we've seen over the last few events, and really it feels like for the most part of this calendar year, is that his struggles with the driver. And while he may be able to club down a lot, this certainly isn't a course where you can get away with being in the rough or those fairway bunkers. So I'm not really on Xander. I do like Jason Day at 9,200. I think being just below Kuchar, he might, be a little less than he normally would. He is an Ohio resident. He, I believe, is a member at this course also. Now, that hasn't translated into strong performances. I think he's only had one T25 or something like that in his appearance. Well, yeah. So is it T15 2 years ago? He finished 44th last year, but 23rd at the PGA Championship, 24th at Wells Fargo, and then 5th at the Masters. So I like Day a lot. He's certainly got the length where he can still club down and be more accurate off the tee and put himself in position to, really get on the green. And even if he doesn't, like you said, his around the green game, his scrambling is elite, if not one of the best on tour. So I really like Jason Day a lot at 9,200.
Yeah, the issue with Jason Day, like we talked about, is the green regulation numbers and the approach are so bad. So of one of the key stats, he ranks 106 this year in strokes gained approach. It's not very good, and he's only ranking 60th around the green. So you're really relying on the putter there. He's only had one top 20 finish in the 10 times he's played this event, I think. One top 27 finish, which was the 15th 2 years ago. So Jason Day is not on my list for this week. I don't think he'll have a tough time if he's keeps missing all the greens that he's been missing. But I think Kuchar's fine. Hideki at 9,100 is my second favorite there. He could, I guess, possibly fight Kuchar for being most popular in this range. It could be within a couple percentage points, but Hideki, if you look through, he won here in 2014. Overall, has had really good course history. He's played well here in the past, and then his numbers just look stupid. He's gaining strokes in almost every single category, and he's been gaining strokes in every category for what seems like, looks like about 5 months. So I think Matsuyama is a extremely good play for this week, especially. That's pretty much it. I might have a little interest in Finau. I'm not really sure. I know last week he finished second, but he did gain a decent amount of strokes putting versus the field, which I don't love chasing the next week. Wasn't crazy, but still, his ball striking hasn't been as consistent as it has been in the past. I'd rather put my shares on a Kuchar and on a Matsuyama, assuming Finau's still not going to be not popular. So.
Yeah.
All right, man. We can hop down into the 8K range. Leading off up at the top is Bryson DeChambeau and Gary Woodland. So for me, Woodland is one of my favorite. 8,800. He actually grades out the best for me on his recent stats. So like looking through my stats going into this event, so kind of trending since, we'll say, the Florida swing, because he was, I don't know if it's a Florida narrative or what. I think he missed every single cut in Florida. He has a 4th place finish in 2016, 23rd place last year, and a 49th in 2017. I think he grades out extremely well for this type of golf course. Obviously, very good with the driver. Won't need to play it as much. Like, he's still going to have to hit it a ton, but not going to have to play his driver as much as he normally would on a longer golf course. And his irons have been pretty good, or trending in the right direction for me. So 8,800, I'm not interested in Bryson. Pass on defending champion. He doesn't seem to be playing good. Losing strokes off the tee and approach doesn't look great. Just something doesn't seem right. So I am perfectly fine fading DeChambeau this week. Not many people. I don't know if anyone's ever defended their title at this tournament. Looking through the results, usually it's a miscut the year after, to be honest. Like Hideki, Kuchar did finish 15th the next year. Hideki miscut 2 years later, and Duffner miscut the next year. So, yeah, I am perfectly fine avoiding DeChambeau there. So, Woodland I like quite a bit, and Adam Scott continues just to be a ball-striking dude. So, I am pretty excited to play him at 8,700. There's really nothing bad I can say from a stat category.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody in the lower range, or just?
I was just hitting the high 8s. I don't know if you had anyone there. You want to echo that or jump down to the 8s? We can the low 8s. We can do that.
Yeah, no, I think I have more interest in Scott than I do Woodland.
Okay.
But again, like you said, there's really nothing to dislike for both of them, as statistically speaking. I do like Stinson at 8,500. I know that his approach game has really come on strong lately, and really it's his putter that's holding him back, I feel, and that too is coming around, albeit a little bit more slowly. But 8,500, I think, is some decent value for Stinson. I will note, I know we said it earlier, I just saw Kevin Na has withdrawn from Memorial.
Yes, I did see that earlier, actually. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
So I brought him up in the intro. Forgot about that. Thanks.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind. Kevin Na has withdrawn. And then Phil Mickelson, I'll jump into the lower 8s. Phil Mickelson is probably my preferred down here. I know Sabatini might be a little bit more popular just because of his current form. He's kind of playing out of his mind, to be honest with you. I don't mind that play, but I think he might be a little bit more popular. And Mickelson at 8,100, I think, is just a little crazy pricing for him. He made the cut at PGA, but he just blew up completely.
Yes,
on the weekends. Like, I think he shot 7 or 8 under over on Friday or Saturday. It must have been, I believe. And then missed the cut at Wells Fargo. I think he also blew up at Wells Fargo on Friday to miss the cut. He was with a couple strokes within the cut line and then shot like a 7 or 8 over as well on Friday to miss it. 18th at the Masters. The form it's probably what you'd most be concerned about, and rightfully so. But he shows up at this course as well. He's got some T10s. He's finished 13th last year, 22nd the year before, 20th the year before that. So I don't mind Mickelson at 8,100. It really, just comes down to that sort of long-standing current form versus course history. Which way do you want to roll with it? And, I could see him being a little bit lower owned at 8,100 and coming out with one of those classic Phil Mickelson coming out of nowhere.
He certainly could. So I'll echo your sentiments on Stenson. So we have him. He's ranked number 1 on strokes gained approach this year on tour. And he's actually, even with hitting 3-wood so much, he's actually 26 off the tee, which is pretty good. He actually, sorry, not off the tee. I'm looking at around the green. And then putting, he is almost dead last. Not good.
Terrible.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying about Mickelson. I would be more probably excited to play Leishman after his WD last week. So there's 2 guys in this range that withdrew last week. Oosthuizen, I think, with a neck injury. That seems to be always his thing with the mattress or whatever it is. So Oosthuizen withdrew last week. I'm not really interested in playing him, but Leishman has had really good success here. He said he withdrew last week with a bad back. We never know what the extent of it is, so it's not like I'd be planting my flag when I'm 80% Leishman, but at 8,000 off a WD, like I assume if he would have played last week and finished top 20, he'd be extremely popular this week, if not $1,000 more expensive. So Leishman at 8,000, I think I have a decent amount of interest in. The only other one there is Sabatini. I might be interested in going back to, but Kokrak, Mickelson, I'm not there. So really those 4 guys I mentioned are my primary targets.
Okay.
All right, man. Let's keep it moving. Hop down into the 7K range. Again, we get guys that have familiar names. We see quite a lot and usually are priced, in the mid upper 8 some weeks. So kind of, I guess 7,500 to 7,900. Who are you primarily looking at here?
So one of my favorite guys, and I know that we brought this up in the live stream last week. I was not on Griot last week, but I don't dislike him this week. I think the main thing for me is just his price was elevated last week, and certainly, his statistics were there, but I think it might have been more of a ownership play for me. 7,900, I can stomach that a lot better. Also coming off what was his finish? Decent finish last week for him. 19th, 23rd at the PGA before that. And he's got a T23 here last year. He's shown some upside 3 years ago, T11. I think that was in his first time out at the event. So certainly don't mind Griot at 7,900. I like that play a lot. But probably my favorite in this 75 and up 7K range is Ty Hatton at 7,700. I know I wrote him up last week, and he played really solid, I think, all the way around Thursday through Sunday. He cooled off a little bit. He had a good Saturday. I think he shot, 3 or 4 under, and then was only maybe 1 under even on Sunday. But overall, his game looks really solid, and he was only 3% last week. I can't imagine his performance, would garner that much more attention to him this week. The only knock, I guess you could say, is he has not played this event before. Now, granted, it's not a disqualifier. I think Hideki won his first time out, or not won, but at least made the cut. Let me just double check that. Yeah, Hideki won his first time out, actually. So, I'm not putting them in the same boat by any means, but Hatton's, striking the ball really well right now, and we know how good a putter he is. I definitely like Hatton at 7,700 again.
All right, yeah, I can get behind Hatton and Griot. we're pretty much on the same page there. I've heard a little bit of chatter around Kyle Stanley. I know he was in a playoff last year, and overall has had really good results here. He finished 6th in 2017 as well, but 7,800 for him, and not even just a price thing, but just off a recent form, like 6,700, and I'd be interested in Kyle Stanley, so I guess it is a little bit of a price thing. But I think he's actually going to be somewhat popular this week. I've already heard a bunch of people mentioning it or asking questions today about Kyle Stanley, and honestly, 7,000 he'd probably be a trap, but 7,800 for me is an easy pass. If he goes and finishes top 10 again, great. Maybe you go bet him for a top 10. His odds are still, I think, at 100 to 1 to win. So just wanted to bring that up. if you are looking through this and you see Kyle Stanley popping for you from a recent form, a little bit of recent form, but mostly course history, I'm not buying into it. Not for this week. So yeah, Hatton there with Griot, I'm totally fine with. And then Horschel, kind of like what we mentioned last week, with a guy that just seems to get the job done. The last 2 years he missed the cut here, but if you go back a couple years for Horschel, starting in, let's see, 2014, he finished 15th and then 11th. So has had some decent finishes here. He would probably be my pivot off of Stanley, to be honest. I think he's playing a bit better, and I think he's just a better player at this point in time. So those are the three guys I'm eyeballing there.
Okay. One other guy I do like is Haotong Li at 7,500. Looking over his form coming in, he finished 36th at the PGA Championship, and really before that, all of his Euro performances have been really strong. Fourth at the China Open. Now, granted, the field in that is not near the PGA caliber I think that we're used to, but 43rd at the Masters, 52nd at the Valero. I don't mind Haotong Li. I think that he will certainly go. Overlooked a little bit, but I was looking at his approach numbers over the last approach and ball striking numbers over the last 5 tournaments, and he rates out really well in the 90-ish percentile in both, I believe. Now, granted, those are only over 8 measured rounds, but some of the higher guys that pop in the rolling stats also may only have 8 or 10 measured rounds. For example, Rory only has 8 lasered rounds. So Haotong Li in that same boat and really looks strong from a statistical base as far as approach and ball striking go. So 2 of the things that I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's probably for some reason I was thinking he was 74, but 7,600. Keegan Bradley is probably my favorite that I'm going to get into a lot of lineups. I think he would probably be your cash play down here as well. Obviously, this year, he kind of transitioned this from last year, and every single year he's been on tour, he's just been a ball striking fool. Gained strokes every single event this year, tee to green. And this event, he actually has had, he finished 23rd last year and had 2 top 10s in 15 and 16. So really, really good results for this event, and his stats back it up for this year. So Bradley and Griot kind of grade out similarly for stats for me. So those 2 there, if I was playing cash, depending on how you build the top range, are probably guys I would camp out at. But certainly in GPPs, I assume Bradley will be lower owned than Griot.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All right, man. Let's hit the lower 7K range. My definitely not my favorite, but a guy that's slowly getting into decent form. Kevin Streelman, 7,400. Actually, I think he's gained strokes tee to green, primarily on approach, his last 3 events. And at this golf course, I think he has some good finishes. If I could pull that up real quick. Yeah, his last 4 years, 18th, 8th, 13th, and 44th. So Streelman is another guy that I like there. Again, we talked about to start the show, there's some pretty strong names that are going to be cheaper this week due to the strength of field. So don't get crazy with the ownership. You don't have to throw him in every single lineup. But like I said, Bradley I like a good bit. I think Streelman's up there. I think he's a really good play in GPPs.
Yeah, I like the Streelman call. He rates out really well in approach over his last 5 events. Really solid ball striking as well. Another guy that, where's that? I lost it. I just had 2 down here that I was going to bring him up, but I have 2 that I'll just go ahead and list, and then you can have the floor. Ben On, I'm totally fine going back to. I think he was in a playoff last year. He's supposedly dealing with a neck injury, but he's been playing so good for such a long period of time. He popped a little bit last week. So totally fine with Ben On. He's going to be a lower exposure for me, but he's certainly in my player pool. And then Ryan Moore, 7,300, I'll have a decent chunk of. Good results here. Decent form. He seems to be trending in the right direction. And then Charles Howell III is the last guy that I'll mention in the low 7s. Stat model has been pretty consistent for me this last probably month.
but he's actually played this event as mediocre as they come. And if you look at his stats this year, they've been far and away the best of his last 5 years. So I'm anticipating another good ball striking week from Charles Howell, and I expect his putting to continue in the right direction. So I like Charles Howell this week a good bit.
Does his form not worry you?
Charles Howell's form?
Yeah.
It looks good. What do you mean?
I'm saying he finished 41st at the PGA, and then he withdrew and miscut at Wells Fargo, miscut at Heritage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's terrible, but it's not blistering coming in.
Right, but I'm not looking at form. I'm looking at stats.
Okay.
I mean, he lost like 6 strokes putting those 3 weeks. And none of those events are anything like this week.
Yeah.
PGA, Bethpage Black isn't like this golf course. Wells Fargo, probably the closest of the 3, and then RBC Heritage, definitely not. So he only lost strokes approach 3 times this year. So I like that quite a bit. That's probably the reason I'll keep going back to him when he gets down the low 7s.
Okay. Fair enough. I like it. Let's see here. So one of the guys that have got some interest in, but he too has not played this event yet, is Joel Damon at an even 7,000. Mm-hmm. And his approach numbers are really strong his last few events. I'm on the fence. I know this low 7K range is really, it's a lot of names that we're familiar with seeing, but really could, just as easily, I think, miss the cut than, top 25.
He's been playing good, though. Like, I can kind of get behind it. It's always an unknown if the guy hasn't played the course, but, like, when you look at him, he's been playing so well. I can't really make an argument against him for this golf course. I think he's plenty long enough. He's accurate enough. Hits a lot of greens. So,
yeah, I think he was my last one in there. I'm not really terribly fond of a lot of guys in this range. I will note, just as a caution, though, in this range, Peter Uihlein is going to get talked up. I don't know to what extent, but he finished 5th last year and 25th the year before. He finished 13th last week at the Charles Schwab and then 5th at the Byron Nelson the week before that. But prior to that, we're talking 5, 6 missed cuts.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe this is the time of year where he pops, but as far as like approach numbers and, ball striking, things that we're trying to key in on to help you sort of narrow down our player pool.
Yeah, he's starting to do a bit of it with the putter. So, yeah, he's kind of that same Kyle Stanley category where I've already heard a little bit of chatter about him, and it's definitely not for me this week.
Yeah.
So take that for what it's worth. But his finishes here the last couple of years look good. But again, like we use course history, but it's not an absolute. So don't go chasing rainbows for Peter Uihlein this week. If he plays well, or you feel like he plays well, and you don't want to risk having a good 6 of 6 with a Peter Uihlein in case he misses the cut, but you still want to have something on him, go place a bet on him or place a top 20 bet on him. His odds are plenty long enough that you can get some leverage. For DraftKings, there's quite a few guys down there that have some risk involved where their odds are going to be longer due to the strength of field, and that's probably if you really can't get over not playing someone, like, man, what if I miss out this week? If that's your thing, then go bet it. That's what it's there for, to leverage a little bit and give you some kind of out. But yeah, I'm 100% with you. I don't think Uihlein has the stats to back up his performances the last couple years. And honestly, it's with the putter. So if he continues just putting crazy, then that's going to happen. But you got to look at, just compare his stats with like a Streelman or a Keegan Bradley, and you tell me who's the better play.
Exactly.
It's night and day. So,
and if you find yourself with 72 or 7,300 left, and you're trying to decide what to do, there are guys. We'll get to them here in the next few minutes, but there are plenty of guys, I can name 3 or 4 right off the top of my head in the 6Ks that I would gladly take over Peter.
Probably,
Uihlein.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll lead off with one right now if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Max Homa, 6,700.
There
Gaining
you go.
strokes every single event since basically the Wells Fargo when he won. It played again last week, played awesome. He again, when you start looking at the stats behind the performances, what are you looking for? You're looking at tee to green. You're looking at ball striking specifically. He's doing it all. Like he's a pretty good driver of the golf ball. His irons have been much better the last month and a half. So Max Homa at 6,700 is one I'm pretty excited to play. I will mention one. I don't know how much chatter he's getting up because I know I looked into him. Let me look at his recent or his course history. Maybe that's why I think he'll be talked up. Nope,
You
just
talking
kidding.
JB?
No, it's his recent form. Give me a second to compile my thoughts, and I'll break it down real quick. He's not gonna be a fun play. We'll say that.
That's
So, all right, I got a couple notes on him.
Let me hear it.
$6,800 Matthew Every. Trending in the right direction for me, obviously mostly off his last two finishes. He finished second at the Byron Nelson, gained a little bit of good chunk of strokes putting, gained 6.5 strokes on the field putting. And then Charles Schwab last week, again, he finished 17th. I started doing a little bit more digging when you start breaking it down by round. So like sometimes just looking at the overall event, like you just talked about someone I mentioned as far as their finishes, but when you start like looking at Matthew Every, just say Matt Every, you look at his round by round scores. In 6 of the last 8 rounds he played, he gained strokes on approach. So it's not like he's gaining 8 strokes on approach one round and the rest of the rounds are like even or he's losing strokes. He's been pretty consistently gaining strokes on approach, which is good. He also makes a ton of birdies. Like he's making two birdies on average more than the field in his last couple events. And consequently, he's 13th in DK scoring 2 weeks ago or last week, and he was second in DK scoring at the Byron Nelson. So at a course where their guys are going to average 4 birdies a round, if he's hitting his irons well and he's making 6-7 birdies around, even if he's making bogeys, that's some good scoring for you. If he finishes 10th place or 20th place, he might still finish in the top 10 of DK scoring. For a $6,800 guy, I'm willing to take a shot on that.
All right, you got anybody else in there?
In the upper sixes, I'll let you kind of take over there.
Okay, so I don't mind Corey Connors at 6,900. I could see myself falling to him. I think between him and I don't want to play Harold Varner III, but you just need to remind me to play good players.
I'd rather play Juiced.
Yeah, he's going to suck me in with that PGA outside of that final round. But yeah, so Juiced is one of my top guys. I know he's a little bit further down, 6,500. Matt Jones at 6,500 is not a terrible play either. And then I believe I had one more guy. No, that was it that I was looking at. What do you make of Brandon Grace being 6,800?
I don't know, pretty crazy, right?
That's crazy. I mean, I know he's not long by any means off the tee, but that's just, I mean, he's normally a guy that you might see 80 in the 8K range, right?
Yeah, he was. I think I played him the last time he missed the cut. He was like 8,200 and I played him. He's never played this golf course well, and like his recent form really isn't there. He hasn't been playing a ton anyways, but with it being a stronger field, I probably can't get behind it. If this was like the Quicken Loans, I would probably give it a double take at 6,800, but when you start looking up the field and you just look at his odds to win or top 20 even, like there's a reason why he's down there. Like the form doesn't back it up, so you're basically just catching a falling knife. Not really interested in Brandon Grace 6,800. I'm okay with Corey Connors. I'm not excited to play him. I'm not really bought into his longevity. Like we talk about his strokes gained approach and how great he is. It's kind of the same with Taylor Gooch, which I'm not terribly excited to play this week either. But when you look at these guys that are gaining so many strokes on approach, and that's basically what they're doing it with. Like the putter's not really there, besides the one tournament he won where he putted lights out. It's hard for me to really get behind that. Like at least show me a little bit of upside with the putter. So neither of them are really something I'm excited to play. I do have one down there. I was probably going to put in my article this week, but I'll go ahead and lay them out. It's definitely not going to be Mr. Panda, who's back in the field this week. But the one guy that I have a little bit of interest in, he's certainly going to be a $5 big GPP type of player, and we'll see if we can stack a couple extra 9K guys in there with this lineup. But we got David Lingmerth, who actually won this event. He's 6,300. He won it in 2015. Then he finished 27th, 15th, and 29th. We haven't seen a bunch of them. I think he was hurt or he had some type of medical issue. But if you look at his last showing, he gained 3.27 strokes on approach. He hit 87% of his fairways, 76% of his greens, and he was 11th in the field in birdies. So he actually, it's very small sample because it was just his last event. He looks like he's rounding back into decent form where he could contend this week or at least make the cut at 6,300, which is essentially what you want. So David Lingmerth this week is another guy that, for GPPs, let you do some weird things with your lineups at 6,300. Maybe throw in your Juice Luton with him, and all of a sudden your basically average salary remaining is like 9,900. So
yeah, definitely
crazy. So that's pretty much it for down there.
All right, I think that's everything I've got. Steve Stricker also down there at 60. What is he at? 63. Yeah. I'm going to look into him a little bit more. He hasn't played hardly any, really similar to Lingmerth.
Well, he's on the Champions Tour, man. He's not a PGA Tour guy anymore.
There you go. So, Old Man River playing, missed the cut at the PGA Championship by one. Last time he played a PGA event was back at Valspar. He missed the cut by one, but he's won this event before. Didn't play it last year, but he did the year before and made the cut. So, certainly a dart throw, I think, if you're multi-entering something. But, I'm not completely upset with that pick. I could see that working out potentially.
I mean, what do you think his upside is? I don't see him finishing in the top 20 or something.
Are we looking for top 20 upside down here?
For sure. For a GPP? You said a GPP.
Yeah, I mean, that's preferred, but is that reality?
I don't think it's a reality for him to finish in the top 20. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, I guess in my mind, I was just thinking of cut makers down here, but granted, in GPPs, you're going to need more than that.
It's a 120-man field, so you're going to need 6 to 6 isn't going to get you very much this week.
Yeah.
You're really like the David Lingmerth call. I'm honestly looking for a guy that he can finish in the top 20 again, like he has 3 of the last 4 years plus a win.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple guys down here that certainly could do that, but I don't see Stricker being that guy anymore. I mean, he's averaging like 262 off the tee with his driver. So,
well, he doesn't have to club down then.
No, he definitely does not have to club down. Limits his off the tee club selections. So,
yeah. Well, maybe X out Stricker then.
I mean, you could look into it more, man. But I mean, he's playing the Champions Tour for a reason.
Yeah.
Not just because he's 50, but because he couldn't play on the PGA Tour at his length anymore. So, I think he's got past winning or past winner status. That's why he can get into this event. So, that's why he's in it. It has nothing to do with like finishing top 10 recently or something like that.
Yeah.
So be careful with some of them. But yeah, I like your call on Juiced. I think Juiced is a sneaky one too. You can see that in the PGA and Euro mix rolling stats on fantasygolfbag.com. You can see all those European guys' stats correlated or see how they match up to the PGA Tour guys. So that'll pretty much do it, man. Any final thoughts as far as the field in general or the course or anything contest selection-wise?
No, I think we pretty much said it all. I'm looking forward to another good week here. Still searching for my first 6 of 6 this year, which is pretty pitiful. But
Yeah, but you only play, what, one lineup or three lineups at the most?
For the most part, it's just one lineup.
Yeah, so you're a single entry guy.
But at any rate, I'm excited about this week. I do really enjoy this tournament. The golf course, I've heard it's in really good shape, and I think the weather, I know we didn't touch on weather, and normally we hit that on Wednesday for the live stream, but outside of a couple, chances of pop-up thunderstorms, it's not supposed to be getting much wind, and should be nice weather. So I'm really looking forward to this event.
Yeah, the course is in awesome shape. So definitely tune in and watch it. It should be fun, and looking forward to building some lineups. We'll be back for the live stream Wednesday night, so you can find that at twitch.tv/Redkacheek. So that'll be where I go over the some ownership plays. We'll have a better understanding of that top range, which we talked about. Rory, Tiger, Justin Rose, etc. And, of course, the weather. We'll see if there's any distinctive splits. But Dublin, Ohio generally is pretty mild weather-wise, especially this time of year. So besides some thunderstorms, which they would rain out or they would halt play anyways, I don't think there'd be any drastic wind like we would see down in Texas. So
yeah.
Looking forward to a fun week, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast again. You can check back later this week for the live stream. You can check back for all of our articles and content. Skylar has the rolling stats up mixed with the Euro stats, like I mentioned. You can find that at fantasygolfbag.com. And then we got another Millie Maker right around the corner. So definitely a lot of fun stuff in store. Definitely register for the Listener League. You can find that in the description of the video. Leave a rating and a review if you could. That always helps us out. And check us out on Twitter. If you ever need a question answered, you can tweet at us or DM us. We're always open to answer your questions. So hope you guys have a fantastic week building your lineups. We look forward to some green screens come Sunday afternoon. So have a good one, guys. See ya.